to a brand new episode of Coming Distractions brought to you by the Nerdpocalypse podcast. I'm your host, Jay. I'm here with my co-host this week, Brad.
Hello.
All right, guys, we're back. This episode, we're going to talk about the new James Bond movie, No Time to Die. This one is directed by Cary Fukunaga, who also co-wrote it with a couple of people, but the other big name there for the writing team is Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Obviously starring Daniel Craig on his sixth James Bond outing and his last
fifth and final James Bond outing.
Fifth and final. Yeah. So Brad, you are a minor fan of the James Bond franchise. To say the least.
I've watched a few, talking about a few on a podcast or 20, or 24 to this point. So
Brad, you got to see this, rightfully so. What can you give a brief synopsis of the film and then your overarching thoughts, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah. So, and this is spoiler free, by the way. The spoiler filled review will be on the Men with the Golden Tongues when Micah is able to see this film as well, and we could talk about it together. But yeah, basically, it is being advertised as the end of the Daniel Craig James Bond saga, and it very much is the end of the Daniel Craig James Bond saga, which is something that they've done a little bit differently. Basically, James Bond has left MI6 when we get to this film. He's off with Madeline Swan, much as as they left Spectre at the end together, hanging out, and a secret from Madeline Swan's past has emerged its head. Which causes Bond to kind of abscond off to Jamaica for a while. And then he comes back when the world is basically getting ready to fucking explode thanks to some villainous shit going on. And it's interesting because this is the James Bond series used to exist kind of like in the ever present now, right, where there was continuity to them to an extent, but there was no like through line from one to the other. Well, that's changed with the Daniel Craig films. It really started to head that way with Skyfall. It really ramped up in Spectre. And like I mentioned up top, this is kind of the culmination of that arc. But it's also one of the more interesting films of the Craig saga because a lot of the thing about this movie that's being talked about is its runtime, which is about 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Oof,
and
wow.
It's interesting because it's actually, it feels like two 80-minute movies. And the first 80-minute movie that you watch is almost like an old school, fucking Bond romp with tons of crazy action and just lots of irreverent fun. And then the last 80 minutes is another movie that they kind of go back to the story that they've been telling about this James Bond character through the film franchise so far, and that's more akin to like the Sam Mendes movies, which were Skyfall and Spectre, which were a lot heavier than your typical James Bond film are. It's interesting. There's a couple plot points that happen in this movie that are going to be talked about and be very divisive to people that watch this film because they're able to do some things that previous Bond films weren't able to do just because of the method in which they're telling the story. Okay. With James Bond in this one. I will say, as a James Bond super fan, this movie is laden with a ton of Bond nerdery in terms of references, not just from previous films, but also from Bond literature. They bring a Bond plot point from the literature series that is kind of obscure. And if you haven't read the books, you might not even realize it's from the books. But I thought that was pretty cool. There's a blink if you miss it appearance of somebody as well that I'd have to watch it again to confirm that it was the person I thought it was. But if it was, there was a very cheeky cameo in this film, which is pretty interesting as well. But the other thing that's really cool is that the gang's all back for this one. Jeffrey Wright's back as Felix Leiter for the first time since Quantum of Solace. All of the MI6 crew gets back together for this film as one. There's even a not on-screen cameo from an old person from the Daniel Craig James Bond trilogy, which I'll leave at that.
Nice.
And it's it's just a very interesting way of telling the story. But I have a feeling that this is going to be a divisive film for a lot of people. Now, that being said, the action in the film is top notch. There's some really cool action sequences, especially in that first hour and a half where you're kind of romping through things. Christoph Waltz is back as Blofeld, which you get to see as well in the film. But where you land on this film is really going to be what your expectations are going into it. If you're really invested in this like Daniel Craig, James Bond character and invested in the story that they've been telling now through 4 films, then I think you'll really like this because it is a very satisfying conclusion in a lot of ways to that Bond's character. If you want more, if you kind of pine for the old school, like irreverent James Bond kind of movie, then you'll really like the first like 75 minutes of this movie, and then you might be a little let down.
Yeah, it's funny because like I really enjoyed Skyfall. Like I like Skyfall a lot. My second favorite of the Craig movies. I mean, I feel like if you didn't love Casino Royale, like what are you even doing here? But Skyfall was great, but also like upon multiple watchings of Skyfall, it's a slog. Like it you're like, wow, geez, this movie 4 hours? Like what is taking so long? So it's kind of cool to know that they're going back to something a little bit lighter. I would like to see the franchise move back that way a bit, not all the way, because I think like Skyfall had a really great story and the acting was excellent and everything else, but it did feel almost like in multiple watchings, like this might be a little too heavy for a James Bond movie, right? Like this guy flies around in a jetpack on occasion, right?
And Spectre was much the same way. Like Spectre was an incredibly heavy film as well. This one kind of toes the line. Loretta Lynch is a lot of fun in this movie. They use her as a kind of
Lashana Lynch.
Oh, Lashana Lynch. My apologies. Yeah, Loretta Lynch definitely not
not the same person.
They do something interesting with her, which is they kind of play on a classic Bond trope, but they do it in a very interesting way. I
don't know how people don't see this one coming, but okay.
Well, it's pretty obvious in hindsight. Like it was talked about a lot, but again, the interplay between the two of them is really interesting as well. Jeffrey Wright, I was super happy to see him back as
love him in these films.
Felix Leiter. He's a very good Felix Leiter, and he gets some fun screen time in this movie as well. I enjoyed it a lot, but again, I have a feeling that this is going to be maybe not as divisive as Spectre was, because a lot of folks were really down on Spectre.
Right.
But I have a feeling that this is going to land firmly in the middle of like the Craig era films in terms of.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't think people are going to place it above Casino Royale and Skyfall. It's certainly above Spectre and Quantum of Solace in my eyes.
I mean, Quantum of Solace is a bar laying on the ground, for God's sake.
No, you get out of there. Quantum of Solace gets better with repeat viewings.
You know what? I'll never know. I'll never know.
It's definitely not the upper echelon.
No,
I don't think of the Craig trilogy.
I mean, it's not their fault. It was during the writer strike, for God's sake.
It's definitely not. But like I said, I had a good time. It's worth seeing. It's a cool movie to see on the big screen as well. If you're willing to go and go to the theater, just obviously take precautions when you do so. If you're not a super huge James Bond fan, you can probably wait. Like that, it's a long movie. If I had to give it a star rating, I'd probably give it a firm like 4 stars out of 5. I would say. Okay. I feel like that. James Bond super fan. I feel like if you're not a super fan, you might kick it down to like a 3.5.
Okay. All right. Like, I feel like if I'm going to see a James Bond movie and I get a good 4 out of 5, like I'm pretty darn happy about that, because like that franchise has had it has gone from amazing to what even is this? Like, what are we even watching? Right. So it's kind of nice to see, a movie kind of hit above, like, well above average. Like that's pretty good. I think I am going to miss Craig as Bond. It's really funny because when he started out, I always saw him as like thug James Bond. Like even in the beginning of Casino Royale, he's just like throwing people through toilets or urinals, right? Like, which was pretty great. And then over time, he kind of really, they did a good job of sliding him into what we saw as more of a conventional version of James Bond. But not boring.
He's going to end up the most fully fleshed out of a character
easily
James Bond has ever been. Like by far and away the most fully fleshed out character that James Bond's ever been. Right. And I'm actually kind of excited to see them cast a new actor in the role and go a different direction, because as you'll see with the end of this movie, once this movie is done and dusted, the sky is the limit. They can do a lot of different things with James Bond after this film. So I'm kind of interested to see the direction that they take the franchise and what they plan on doing with it. But like I said, I think this was a good conclusion to the Daniel Craig saga. Rami Malek, I've gone all this time without.
That was my last question, actually. Yeah. Like, what was his? How was he in this?
I gotta be honest. Like, he wasn't bad, but he was just kind of there. Like Rami,
that's disappointing, man.
Yeah, you would expect like getting a guy like Rami Malek to play a Bond villain would be a perfect fit, and he's not bad. But he's almost like just kind of riding along for the plot. Like the plot's almost not even about him. You don't even really see Rami Malek until half the movie's over, which is very interesting. That's why I said like the first half of the movie is like a completely different film that you're watching.
Interesting.
So like I said, Rami Malek did not put his stamp on the role. I don't think they could have really cast any charismatic actor in the position that he was in.
Right.
His character is a wink and a nod towards another James Bond allegory of the past.
I figured. Yeah.
It may not be the one that you think. It may not be.
Okay. So, I'm not a James Bond super fan, so it's gonna be wrong, I'm sure. But I definitely have my guesses.
But he was just kind of there, honestly. Like and it wasn't really this was very much like the thing that carries this film is James Bond, and his relationship with Madeline Swan is the driving force behind this movie. But then again, everyone else also gets to have a pretty cool moment in the film as well, in terms of like all the friends between like M and Moneypenny and Q and Tanner and folks like that as well. Nice. So that was cool.
All right, so you're going 4 out of 5 for this.
4 out of 5 if you're a big James Bond fan. 3 out of 5 if you are I would say casual,
a filthy casual.
Filthy casual.
All right, so there you go. Whether you're a filthy casual or a super fan, there's your score for the new James Bond movie, No Time to Die. Brad, thank you. And we will see you guys next time.